Good evening and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Council. My chaplain is actually on holiday, and as I know lots of people have no faith at all, what I thought we would do tonight is have a few minutes silence, and during that minute's silence can we please remember former councillor and former mayor Wesley Sanford, whose funeral was today. So may he rest in peace. Thank you, councillors. Well, first of all, before we start this meeting, we have a whole stack of announcements. So welcome to members of the public and councillors. A few things in case of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening. If an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronald Street. The council audio records all its public meetings, and these recordings are published on the council's website. There are toilets available on this floor as well as the ground floor and the second floor of the town hall. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. We have quite a few apologies tonight. We have apologies from Councillor Davies, Ellis, Fairley Crowe, Liddy, Lissimore, Nash, Manning, B. Oxford, G. Oxford, Offen, Councillor Cable and Councillor Moore. I've got Councillor Ellis already. So we now move on to have your say. I've got two members of the public who would like to speak. So can I call on Joseph Rawlings, please, to speak? You will have 3 minutes and the bell will go after 2 minutes. To remind you, you'll have a minute left over, so please speak.
I'm here representing Colchester Equality, a community-established group that aims to make Colchester a fairer place to live and work by reducing economic inequality. Income inequality creates a poorer quality of life for everyone in society and has an adverse effect on aspects as disparate as health, crime, education, social mobility and trust within a community. Colchester Equality is working in affiliation with the Equality Trust, a charity which is working to build a social movement for change based on analysing and disseminating research and supporting other groups like ourselves around the country. UK income inequality is among the highest in the developed world, and the South East has the greatest gap between the highest earners and those on medium income outside of London. Colchester Equality is working with the support of the Living Wage Foundation to promote Colchester as a living wage hub. The Living Wage Foundation propounds the living wage hourly rate of £7.85, as calculated by the Centre of Research in Social Policy, not the government's recent redefinition of a living wage. While it is not the sole solution to addressing inequality, the living wage provides a good basis for companies to ensure that workers are paid fairly and are able to live sustainably on their wages. Colchester Equality is pleased that Colchester Borough Council led the way in Essex in becoming a living wage council, and more recently in making payment of living wage a requirement for contracted companies. We would like to ask the Deputy Leader of the Council how the Council can continue to promote the living wage in local businesses, making Colchester a fairer, more equal place to work, and what other actions the Council is taking to reduce inequality across the borough.
Councillor Feltham, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say that I was very pleased with Councillor Corey to be able to attend the launch of Colchester Equality last week. It was really impressive. There were over 40 people there, and many of the founders have attended Philip Morant School, went to university, and have now come back to Colchester. So we see a really good basis for a local campaigning group. And as Mr. Rawlins has said, this Colchester Equality is a branch of a larger London-based organisation, the Equality Trust, and I have known that group for a long time, and it just tells us that inequality within societies is often as damaging as between societies. And if you'd allow me for a minute to toddle down memory lane, I took this material out to Eastern Ukraine when it first came out. And it did make an impression. Unfortunately, as we now follow the news, that a lot of those towns have been destroyed. Anyway, back to Colchester. I certainly personally support the aims of Colchester Equality, and this administration does too. We all want our residents to share in the prosperity and the opportunity as Colchester moves forward and grows. And so Joseph's quite right. We are the first living wage council in Essex. We now require not only ourselves to pay the living wage, but also our contractors. And we also prioritise contractors using local people wherever that's possible, and also to see how local businesses can, for instance, take on apprenticeships so that we are spreading the benefits across a wider group of people. So I wish you good luck with your with Colchester Equality.
Thank you very much. Can I then ask Joe Hayes, please, to come and speak? And as a member of the public, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and the bell goes at 2 minutes.
I feel it is a suitable moment to announce that the claim that I owed this council a debt for legal costs, which I was refusing to pay, is not true, never was true, and I believe any suggestion to the contrary is defamatory. Last September, 2 articles appeared in the local press quoting the leader of the Conservative Council group at that time, Councillor Quince. In one of them, he was quoted as saying that it was only right and proper that I should not have a vote until the debt is paid. In the second article, Councillor Quince was quoted as calling for serious sanctions against me, and he called for me to resign or for my group leader to expel me from the group. Both articles referred to the supposed fact that these calls for my resignation were about my delay, quote unquote, in paying a debt, quote unquote, for legal costs. The references were to the costs of my attempt to challenge Whitbread's planning permission granted in 2012 for a hotel, which has been discussed in the press. And as of today, the council owes me slightly over £10,000, for which a draft has just been received this evening by me. After the council's costs were independently assessed by an officer of the court, there has been no deal and no discount. I paid £20,000 on account, and I'm getting more than half of it back. This balance of 10,000 odd has been owed to me since April of this year. I have pointed out to Councillor Quince that there was no such debt, there never had been, and the delay was all on the council's side, but for some reason he is reluctant to admit his mistake and correct the record. When Margaret Thatcher realised she had made a mistake, she corrected herself immediately and without hesitation. I invite Councillor Quince or his successor as Conservative leader to do the same. And finally, if anyone is thinking If anyone is thinking of putting inaccurate information before the Planning Committee in order to obtain a valuable planning permission, please take note that I remain prepared to challenge any such permission that I believe to have been obtained in such a way.
Thank you very much for that statement. So we now move on. We now move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes. I move that the minutes of the council meetings held on the 27th of May 2015 to be confirmed as a correct record. Council, can I put this to you? This is a correct record? Thank you very much. That's agreed. Agenda item 4 is the Mayor's announcements. Well, first of all, can I say thank you to everybody who supported me so far. I've got 3 events coming up as Mayor's events. First of all is the cricket tent on the 5th of August, which is the one-day match. With any luck, we've secured some sponsorship, and so tickets, there are only 30 of them, will be offered to people at £50 per person. So if you would like a ticket, please contact me or Zoe, the Mayor's secretary. Secondly, this coming Sunday, I'm going to be running the Race for Life, which is only 5k, not the marathon yet, that's next year. I do have a sponsorship form, so if anybody would like to sponsor me, I'd be most grateful. And finally, this is a bit in advance, but October time is the fast swim. The Mayor always puts a team in at 10 o'clock in the morning on the fast swim day. I have swum several times for various other mayors. If you'd like to swim on that event, the more the merrier, because then it means you have to swim less lengths. Those are my announcements at the moment. Thank you. Oh, and if you want to follow what I'm doing, I do have a Mayor of Colchester's Facebook page, Mayor of Colchester 2015-2016, and you can see all the events that I do. I think I'm up to event 60 already. So we are now on declarations of interest, item 5. All right, Councillor Bentley.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Declaration of interest on the motion 3, which is Park and Ride. I know we don't normally announce declarations if we're from another authority, but this is about policy of the Essex County Council, so I'm declaring a personal interest on advice of the monitoring officer.
Thank you very much. Councillor Quince, MP for Colchester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, on agenda item 8, 2 and 4, I'm advised that I have an interest, as I cannot speak and therefore be in a different capacity asked to take action, so I will be leaving the chamber for those 2 items.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jowers.
Same as Councillor Bentley, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor T. Young.
I guess as a spouse, same as Councillor Bentley. And on the item on urology cancer services, I have a disclosable pecuniary interest as a non-executive director of Southend Hospital Trust, and therefore I shall be leaving the chamber for that item.
Councillor J. Young.
Yes, the item 8, which is urology cancer services, is a pecuniary interest, and I shall be leaving the chamber as a result of being the spouse of a non-executive director. I think that's right.
And I'm sure if there are any other declarations of interest, you will announce them at the various times. So thank you very much on that. We then move on to item 6.
Madam Mayor.
Items referred under call-in procedure. There are none. Item 7, recommendations and resolutions of Cabinet panels and committees. 7.1, I invite Councillor Bourne, please, to propose motion B.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 7 little I, a new housing strategy for Colchester, motion B. I move that the recommendation contained in minute 60 of the Cabinet meeting of 18th of March 2015 be approved and adopted.
Councillor Bourne, you may continue.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, Colchester Borough is the second largest district in the county of Essex, and Colchester is a great place with lively communities, a wealth of history and local interest, and some beautiful natural areas. Our council-wide strategic plan explains how we can build on this to achieve our aims. A good choice of housing helps the borough achieve many of its ambitions. This housing strategy before you sets out the council's ambitions for housing in the borough of Colchester over the next 5 years. It describes how we intend to use our resources, working with and influencing housing organisations in the voluntary, public and private sector to enable us to achieve our strategic priorities. There is no one single action which will make a difference to the housing situation in Colchester, but by achieving lots of smaller actions and adding these together, we can make a significant difference. I'd like to refer you to page 31 of your papers, where you can see the achievements since the last strategy. I'd also, Madam Mayor, like to thank members, very many members, who attended the briefing in November last year, and hopefully those comments that members made, you'll see that the draft strategy as it was then, has been amended accordingly. We consulted widely on this strategy using our partner organisations, members and focus groups too, and you'll see that there are a number of priorities, if I just pick out a couple, to create mixed communities which are economically, environmentally and socially healthy and resilient, and improving the life chances of Colchester's residents, including their health and well-being. There is no doubt that housing and health go hand in hand. It comes very close to the top of the list of what residents want to see improved in Colchester, and has a direct impact on their own well-being and life chances. I commend the strategy to you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any speakers on the item? None that I can see. So therefore, Councillor Bourne, would you like to sum up or go straight to the vote? Oh, Councillor Young.
Sorry, I'm surprised that nobody wanted to actually debate this further. The only thing I actually wanted to ask the portfolio holder is whether there's been any change of approach as a result of the right to buy that came out in the budget, how that will be reflected in the strategy as we move forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The right to buy and the change in that programme may influence our housing investment programme, and that is something that we will have to look at. It's not something we can change immediately, but yes, there may be some changes that will be brought forward. We'll have to look at our 30-year housing investment programme.
Councillor Jowers.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, it's very similar to last year's housing strategy, and we voted that through. It's actually a good strategy. I really like congratulating Councillor Bourne. But there's one or two gentle omissions. I think perhaps a little more emphasis on rural communities in the borough. And in terms of partnership, the parishes. They are democratically elected, and I did notice in the list of consultees that perhaps the Colchester Association of Local Councils, it has come up through the strategic plan for the Local Development Committee. So apart from that, I think that's easily put right. Virtually all of these, in fact, do apply to rural areas, but I think that we're going to have real difficulties with rural poverty and rural housing as they will come into Colchester if there's no provision for them. So other than that, it's a really good report, and that's why should we oppose it? Congratulations.
Councillor Bourne, to sum up.
Thank you. I totally agree with Councillor Jowers on the rural issues, which is why we still, as an authority, invest in the rural housing enabler. And I was very happy last year to meet with some parish groups regarding local exception sites. And it's something we will continue to do in those parishes where that exception is, where we can use that rule. There is definitely a need for more rural housing, because we know, and I've heard it said so many times from parishes, that people want to keep their children in the villages where they were born and brought up, rather than having to move to another metropolis.
Thank you very much. All those in favour of the motion, please indicate.
It's carried, Madam Mayor.
It's carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 7(2), and I'm going to invite Councillor Hayes, the Deputy Chairman of the Governance Committee, to move the motion.
I move that the recommendation contained in Minute 3 of the Governance Committee meeting of the 30th June 2015 be approved and adopted. The High Steward of Colchester was established by a royal charter of King Charles I in 1635. the Charter stipulated that thenceforth forever there shall be a High Steward to advise and direct, quote unquote, the Mayor and Commonalty in the chief business touching that borough, which High Steward would continue in office during his natural life. King Charles I, as we recall, believed he had the divine right to rule by personal decree. The High Stewardship can be seen to be based on the same idea. King Charles I fell out so badly with Parliament that civil war ensued, in which we recall the King came second. The first High Steward was the Earl of Holland, who was beheaded in 1649. The second was the Duke of Albemarle, who was said never to have visited Colchester. Others followed, and by the 19th century matters had somewhat improved. The office holders did have a connection with the borough. In 1835, we are told the power to direct the Mayor and Commonalty of Colchester was taken away by statute, and it became ceremonial only. Office holders have included several members of Parliament and former members of Parliament for Colchester, as well as Field Marshal Wavell, who had been the Viceroy of India. The 22nd and most recent High Steward was Sir Ivor Crewe, who was Vice-Chancellor of the University of Essex. He held the office for 5 years until he resigned, having succeeded Lord Butler as Master of University College, Oxford, an office which he still holds. So there is ample precedent for this ceremonial office to be awarded to persons of high standing in this borough, and in particular to long-serving members of Parliament. And so it's entirely appropriate that this council should bestow the office of High Steward on Sir Bob Russell, who served the constituency of Colchester from 1997 until 2015, whose attendance record in Parliament was awesome, and whose record for helping individual constituents with casework is legendary. Sir Bob Russell is already an alderman of this borough in recognition of his long service as a borough councillor and as mayor of the borough. Sir Bob's love for and tireless work for Colchester is demonstrated by his life's work in and for this borough. No surprise then that he became known as the voice of Colchester, a place that he has declared to be the Pearl of the East. I therefore invite this council to bestow the honour which Sir Bob so richly deserves and unanimously support his appointment as the 23rd High Steward of the Borough of Colchester. I so move.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Quince, please, to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, Councillor Hayes put it very eloquently there. I'm delighted that this proposal has come forward, and I just want to give a bit of background about how it all came about. It was about a week after the general election. I was at a barbecue with Alderman Sonia Lewis, and we were trying to work out, and I said to her, look, wouldn't it be fantastic if there was a way in which we could mark in some way the years of public service that Sir Bob put into not only the town but the borough. And she said, well, of course there is. There's been a vacancy for some time, which is the role of High Steward. And it may have come as a surprise, including to my group, but across the chamber, that I would be the one to propose this. But I actually think it's all the more fitting that it did come from me to the Chief Executive of the Council, because when you put aside the politics and you put aside the political knockabout, and we've all been there, we've all been on the receiving end of each other's political party, but when you strip it back to the core, when you strip it back to why we're all sitting here tonight, why they're all sitting there in Parliament, in the European Parliament, and in parliaments across the world, it's about public service. And public service is a high calling, it's a noble calling, and I applaud anybody that does it. And anybody that does it for 40 years, that's 4 decades, and has dedicated that much time of their life, not just to public service, but to this town and to this country, I actually think it's a very suitable honour to bestow on Sir Bob. In particular, this is relevant because it's not just the 18 years in which he served as our Member of Parliament. He's, of course, served as leader of this council and as mayor of the borough. So I think it's all the more important, actually, that it's a borough-wide role. And I can think of nobody more fitting to take the role, and I thoroughly recommend this proposal and this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Councillor Willits to speak, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Can I associate my support for Sir Bob to take this particular post? He has given 18 years of service as MP. Certainly I've crossed swords with him on several occasions, but on these occasions I think we bury the hatchet and say, after such a distinguished career in politics, serving this borough, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, he is deserving of the high office that is proposed as High Steward, and I think he is a worthy person to do so. I have one caveat. High Steward is, of course, a non-political office. He is a friend to all of the council, not just part of the council, in his role as High Steward. Therefore, I was much reassured by the monitoring officer's statement and the details of the minute that the governance committee will be reviewing the details of the appointment, which we understand, if the governance committee agrees, will be on the same basis as an alderman, which is that if you re-enter politics, you have to put aside your aldermanship, or in this case, the highest steward appointment, while one does so. Although I would think that for a person of Sir Bob's calibre, he must have achieved everything he wants to achieve by now, and I'm sure he will be an inspiration to Colchester in a rather different way. We know he's an active chap and he will be doing lots for the borough. So I would give my wholehearted support to Sir Bob being appointed as High Steward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giles, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was sort of in two minds whether or not to. And I'm reassured in the air of magnanimity that resounds through this chamber. I mean, it's a fitting honour for such a modest and unassuming man. I hope he doesn't follow the role of the Duke of Albemarle. But nonetheless, I think that an honorary position is justly deserved, and I think it was put very well in that we put aside some of the knockabout that we've had in the chamber here and hope that Sir Bob will use his considerable talents for the benefits of the town as an entity rather than an ideology. He's well placed to do that, and on that basis I think that it was put forward, of course, by Councillor, now MP, Will Quince, and I think, yes, we should all support it. It's not the sort of thing where there should be dissent, where magnanimity is deserved, then we should give it. So I'd support it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to preface what I'm going to say with a comment that this isn't about the individual. I first entered this chamber just over a year ago. When I was elected to the council, I had high hopes that I was joining a modern authority set up to manage the needs of the residents in the 21st century. And while I have seen that in the main, the administration and officer group are forward-thinking, some of our practices can only be described as antiquated. Robes and paper agendas, for instance, belong to another era, not to 21st century Britain. Let me just put into context that I am a historian by degree, with a deep and abiding interest in the past, in our past. Without an understanding of where we come from and how we got here, we make the poorer decisions about where we are going. When I first arrived in Colchester more than 30 years ago, I quickly immersed myself in the history of our town. The castle, built by the same builder as the Norman Keep at the Tower of London. The town's small but bloody part in the English Civil War. The ancient burial barrows and defences to the west of the town. And of course, the Roman evidence around the town and the evidence of the main settlement built around the Claudian Temple. Most Colcestrians are aware that Boudicca made the first assault on this Roman settlement. I'm not sure how many are as aware as I am of the devastation that was further wreaked upon those Roman remains by a Conservative-run council in the 80s when we bulldozed under the ruins that were excavated where Culver Precinct now stands. I have some understanding of the history of our town, the foundations on which it was built, but I have no desire to live in that past. I don't want to live in 17th century Colchester with its attendant embryonic understanding of medicine, limited life expectancy, and high infant mortality rates. I also don't want to reside in 19th century Colchester, where the primary mode of transport was a horse, an outside toilet was considered a luxury, and the telephone was in its infancy. You might ask why the 17th and 19th centuries? The answer is straightforward, for we're about to vote on the appointment to an office that came into being in the 17th century and was abolished across most of the country in the 19th century. It was originally a powerful office, designed to keep locally elected officials in check. This changed nearly 200 years ago when the office was abolished in all but a couple of dozen municipalities across the country. And today, even fewer of those continue with this anachronism. At least two parties in this chamber are committed to the end of the unelected second chamber in Parliament. So I find myself asking tonight why we are seeking to appoint to an unelected position which by Act of Parliament is intended to, and I quote, advise the Mayor and commonalty in the chief business touching the borough. Doesn't this council already employ experienced and skilled officers to do just that? Although a historian by training, I will always wish to learn from our past. I certainly don't want to live in it. I believe that most of the people we serve also want to embrace the modern. You only have to look around you as you walk down the high street to see the majority wandering around with a phone in their hand or an earpiece permanently attached for the evidence. Colchester Borough Council should be at the forefront of, to paraphrase a Labour Prime Minister, the white heat of the new, the now, the 21st century, not making an appointment to a post that takes us backwards hundreds of years. We should allow the post of High Steward to go the way of the horse-drawn trolleybus and consign it to the dustbin of history.
Thank you very much for your comments. I now call on Councillor P. Oxford to speak, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to agree with my fellow colleagues on Sir Bob Russell. I'd like to say a personal thank you for trying to get my knee better, and also thanks for all your support on the zebra crossing in Highwoods. It was much needed. It's most appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I've got no more speakers, so can I ask Councillor Hayes to sum up, please?
I will just say very little, as I believe the vast majority of the chamber is with me on this. I would just very much hope that Sir Bob does not end up either as the first High Steward or as the second High Steward did. But in answer to Councillor Pearson, I would say that the last High Steward, Sir Ivor Crewe, was an outstanding student of politics and economics, and I believe of political history. he was a professor at University of Essex, and if he felt, and that is a modern university and a modern institution, and if he felt that it was not taking him back to the 17th century and that he was happy to take that honorary role, then I feel we need have no fears on that score, and I therefore invite everybody to support the motion.
So, Council, I now put the motion to you that we accept Sir Bob Russell as the High Steward of Colchester. All those in favour, please. That's carried. Thank you very much. Can I just point out to you that the list of High Stewards is actually behind Councillor Hayes's head, so if you want to study the list, it's a very worthwhile list to study. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 8, which is the motions, and the first motion is Urology Cancer Services, and the Councillors Young will depart. Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Harris, please, to move the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The formal bit, I move that the motion on urology cancer services, the details of which are at page 1 of the supplementary information, be approved and adopted. That's the formal bit over. For those of you that are more observant, I'll make a position one step forward, because my colleague Julie Young has took the place. Now, I'd rather be at the back, because all the best pubs I've ever been to, you get your back against the wall, so you fight your way out. For those that have been in some good pubs, you'll probably know. Those that don't frequent that sort of area won't know what I'm talking about. However, what I'm moving is the urology cancer services. This is a very simple motion, a one-liner, because I'm a simple person. It's a partisan motion, a motion that salutes our local hospital and the health service. It not only salutes the service itself, but the component parts of it. Dedicated staff, local service, state-of-the-art equipment, all within it. Not just a service for service sake, but because it's technologically advanced. You have to go a long way to find such up-to-date facilities, techniques, and the most modern equipment. So yes, it's unashamedly parochial. It's a motion that's up for debate here. You can either support it or not. Now, you can go to any estate in Colchester, any community, and you not have to go far to meet someone who has either been treated by Colchester Urology Department or knows some family member, friend or acquaintance who has. Now, the local Gazette has run a very good campaign about this, and I salute that campaign here. It's been signed by many, many people, and I think it's our chance, friends, to actually support that. The debate is to be had on where this service is carried out. That debate goes on. It's being considered as we speak. And this motion gives a very strong answer to that question. Colchester, Colchester, Colchester is where it should be. Considering any other part of Essex is not in my mindset. We should not expect urology patients from Colchester, or for that matter, Harwich, Tendring, etc., to have to travel to the south of the county for cancer treatment and urology treatment. Colchester already has a world-class cancer centre. Why go elsewhere? To lose our local facility to operate on urology patients would undermine Colchester as a centre of excellence that it is. Colchester serves as well as Southend serves southern Essex. I cannot seem to meet a patient anywhere, and I've spoken to a few in the last few weeks, past or present, who wants to do away with the urology centre we have. Why not listen to them? Tonight, if you could fit in this room all the patients in here who have been treated at Colchester, they would tell you in unison, let it be, as the Beatles said. Colchester has invested heavily in its urology cancer surgical team. It would be mad, absolute madness, to waste that money now. there is already in place brilliant radiotherapy and chemotherapy support. With the senior team, friends, at Colchester, I think the leadership and capability is already there, and they can work with other centres in Essex, and we can be ahead of that. A word of fact, let's not forget that so many of those using the urology services are of senior years, with Colchester and Tendring have a higher proportion than usual of older people. We are all living longer, and thank God for that. I'm, for one, very pleased with that. Yes, as the Beatles said, will you still need me when I'm 64? I hope you still do. Oh, I am 64, I forgot that bit. We need this service in Colchester, otherwise it will be a case of you can't get no satisfaction, like the Rolling Stones said. So sorry about the music, but it's my era, you see. Yes, patient satisfaction with the urology service is high, and people know there is a strong and committed team in place in Colchester. The service at Colchester has grown with the state-of-the-art equipment already in place, and the number of consultants are all on the increase, so we do well. So in summary, I'm asking you, please, to support this motion. It's a simple motion. Our residents would tell you if they were here that the specialist service provided at Colchester are much needed, and its location and connections to surrounding areas in Essex and beyond makes a strong case, if not cast iron, for Colchester to continue to provide these services. Please support.
Thank you very much. At the moment, I've got 4 speakers, so Councillor Buston, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor. May I wholeheartedly support the motion that's put forward by David Harris. I think it's very timely. It's something upon which a lot of people have already put a lot of effort, which is quite obvious if you just read the local newspaper. There have been campaigns that have been started by Will Quince. There have been campaigns that have been started by the paper, and I'm delighted to see an opportunity for us in this chamber to lend our weight to this. I've got a personal reason for supporting, and that is my mother died of cancer. She was 33, and that's no age for any person to lose their life to such a scourge. Okay, it was many, many years ago now, but nonetheless, I'm absolutely certain that part of the problem was not only did they not have the treatments available then that are available now, but it took so long to get her to the treatment and to where it was. And I think it's very important that with a large and growing population such as we have, we fight our very hardest to get the very best for our folk. So, David, I support you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Quince, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fully support this motion, but I just want to make something clear because it could be a little misleading in the motion, in that it states that it supports the retention of urology cancer services in Colchester. I wholly support that, but we don't want to set heads running, and this just relates to the surgical unit at the urology centre. I think we should make that absolutely clear. So the NHS England, as Councillor Harris rightly points out, is due to decide whether we have as Essex one centre of excellence or 2, as we currently have, one in Southend and one in Colchester. I want to echo some of the comments made by Councillor Harris, because I think we have a fantastic cancer centre here in Colchester Hospital. Indeed, it's one of the most modern radiotherapy centres in Europe. We've got leading experts providing care to patients, as he rightly points out. And it was only a few months ago that we invested over £250,000 in a new urology day centre up at the hospital. And I completely agree with him when he says that we should be building on this up at the hospital, not taking it away. I also wholly agree with him that it's totally unrealistic to ask patients from Colchester, let alone as far away as Clacton or Harwich, to travel the 60-odd miles for an operation to Southend for treatment. Now, the argument we've got is to persuade NHS England in the first instance that actually we need 2 centres. And although I take the point entirely about having a centre of excellence for large geographical areas, where that can work in certain cities where you can get across them very easily, you can have the experts in that field working in one unit, that can actually lead to a better quality patient outcomes. But in this instance, the geography of Essex just doesn't make sense, and we need to put that argument across. Now, I've spoken to Sir David Amos, one of the MPs for Southend, and at this stage, I don't think it's actually important that we are championing Colchester above Southend, because I think the first argument is actually that we should have two, because it's really important, because otherwise we're doing a disservice to the residents down in Southend. So there's a strong argument for that. However, if NHS England then make the recommendation that it's only one unit, then we should rightly all get together and fight tooth and nail to ensure that it is in Colchester. Now, I also fully support Councillor Harris in what he says about the campaign led by the Gazette and the Essex County Standard. I'd urge you all to sign up to it, either in paper format or online. Both are readily available. There's a good plug for you there, Zoe. And, I think it's really important that not just through the Gazette and the local papers, but on social media and through letters, that we make it absolutely clear to NHS England how passionately we care about our hospital, which we all know is in special measures, but I'm hoping in the September CQC inspection will come out. But it's really important that we stress how important this service, this surgical unit, is to us here in Colchester, that we make all the points that Councillor Harris and Councillor Buston have very eloquently already made. The only other point I wanted to make about this motion specifically is that however well-meaning it is, there is no call to action. And I think it's really important that we don't just talk, but we take action. So what I will do, I'll take away the feelings and the feedback from this meeting tonight. I'll write to NHS England and I will write to the Secretary of State for Health, and I will make all of our thoughts absolutely crystal clear. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hazel, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Really, I'm just going to add my voice to everything that has been said in support of Councillor Harris's motion. I think it's a very worthy cause, and we in Colchester deserve this excellent service. So thank you, Councillor Harris, for bringing this to our attention, and you have my support, and I know you have the support of everyone on this side of the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Barton.
Gosh. Yeah, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Lib Dem team have been out on 4 occasions collecting signatures of support for the retention of the unit and thus supporting the Gazette's campaign. Now, why I'm saying this is that we've been to a variety of places. We've been to Iceni Square, the Essex County Hospital on their open day, First Sight and outside Kingsford School. And there's been overwhelming support from every quarter for the retention of the centre here in Colchester by Colchester residents. Obviously, one of the main reasons is that residents, as been said by Councillor Harris, in Tendring and Colchester, who needs cancer surgery, would find it far more stressful having to journey to Southend, which isn't actually very accessible. And that is the alternative proposal, as has been stated. I know my late father received the best treatment here and was grateful that we had this facility. But there is a belief by the medical profession that one centre of excellence in Essex would give residents a better chance of survival, and recent data does in fact support this. So the question is, why should this one centre of excellence be in Colchester? Well, firstly, as we all know, we have a specialist team of urology surgeons based here, and considerable amounts of money has been spent in and invested in recruiting them and in buying specialist equipment. Now, these surgeons performed a lot more very complex urological cancer operations than their counterparts in Southend. And the unit here also serves a greater population than the one in Southend. We have 700,000 people compared to Southend's 340,000. Add to that the fact that Southend residents do have a greater accessibility to use the London hospitals, and it makes sense for it to be based here in Colchester. We have the experience, we have an excellent reputation in this field, so I wholly support the motion that a centre of excellence is sited here in Colchester, but with the necessary funding attached to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Bourne, Councillor Graham and Councillor Scott next. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Making any changes to clinical services in our NHS is hard, even when there is solid evidence to justify the change. Some powerful forces are driving the case for change in clinical care. One is the need for some more complex services to be carried out in fewer specialist locations. We've seen vascular surgery, stroke care, trauma care, heart surgery for children as really good examples of where proposals to reduce the number of locations were universally accepted as being clinically justified. The trouble started when it became known which actual locations would no longer be offering the service. We now see this played out locally in Colchester. The clinical evidence, and you've heard some of that tonight, points to urological surgical services being best delivered in one centre per million of population. Here, this means a world-class centre in one of two places. One in Colchester, which is undoubtedly better placed, 700,000 population rather than Southend's 340,000, and the other could be based in Southend. What should be recognised is that wherever the service finally ends up, it will be a better service. The local press and local politicians have got into the Save Our Service campaigning, and there's nothing wrong with that. The local press in Southend, from the same news group, are supporting Southend. They portray the proposals as a cut and a backward step, but nobody says the opposite. A world-class centre is to be opened only a few miles away. The evidence will show that lives can be saved and care overall improved by the change regardless of which of the two possible sites is chosen. It's difficult for us. This evidence is sometimes ignored. There are letters to the local paper demanding both places should be the single centre. For most people, the idea of specialist centres in major London teaching hospitals has long been accepted. If I had a serious eye problem, I'd want to go to Moorfields. Royal Brompton is another place where many people from Colchester travel to. It's a specialist centre. Even when it means some travelling, but forming a new centre for exactly the same reasons is vehemently opposed. I don't agree that campaigning for two centres is the right thing to do. NHS England will make a decision based on one specialist centre per 1 million population, based on clinical evidence. One of the sad features of our care system is the inverse care law. The availability of good medical or social care tends to vary inversely with the need of the population served. That is what we should be campaigning about as well, inequality. We should not support protection of vested interests of those who provide services. We need to have the courage to say that these decisions are best taken based on the clinical evidence of independent clinical experts. Travelling a few extra miles is worth it. It's a hard choice. Hospital stays are now much shorter. We should insist that there has to be a fair and open process, but in the end, the solution will still be better than the status quo, regardless of where the service is located. I fully support this motion. We should support the Colchester Hospitals University Foundation Trust bid only if it's the best for patients overall, which incidentally, I believe it is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very friendly in here tonight, isn't it? Everybody seems to agree with all of the motions going forward. I'm not going to disagree with all of that. I agree with Councillor Harris, who's brought forward the motion. I also agree with a lot of what Councillor Quince has said. In particular, I feel that a campaign for 2 centres of excellence is very important. Centres of excellence have been statistically and clinically proven to increase the success rates of these very, very serious very, very specialised operations. I do wish to agree with Councillor Quince as well when he says we need to make sure that it's urology cancer services, it's not cancer services. The motion, I think, is actually technically incorrect. The Gazette petition also says save our cancer services, and again, to use Councillor Quince's phrase, we don't want to get heads running. I think some people do get a bit confused by the terminology, and I think it's important that it is accurate. It is the urology cancer services surgery. So I get myself confused. On one note of caution that I would like to sound, that if we do end up with one centre of excellence and Colchester is chosen as that centre of excellence, I do want to ensure that Colchester has the appropriate resources, which includes staff, money, infrastructure, to support the significant inevitable increase in patients and visitors that we will be getting. The roads around Mile End, obviously my ward, are already incredibly congested around Colchester Hospital, and it's something that not just the roads but also the ability of the staff to deal properly with the influx of people that will be coming in. That needs to be considered in what is this very complex area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scott.
I just want to also completely speak in favour of a centre of excellence in Colchester, which is fully resourced. But I did want to mention that Councillor Liddy had said to me how disappointed he was that he was not going to be here, because in light of his own recent experience, he is particularly in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chua.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first of all like to thank Councillor Harris for putting this motion forward, and to all the speakers who have, spoken so well about the Centre of Excellence in Colchester on the urology unit. But one thing that I want to point out is the patients, the people who come to this unit, and as has been said, most of them are more of the senior age. And as a mental health nurse, and also as a nurse trained in general nursing, I believe in holistic care, which is care about your physical as well as your mental health. And for the people who have to travel if they have to go to South End from here and from here, the coastal areas, it's a longer journey, and they get very anxious, and it affects how they affects their treatment, and it also affects their family, and it affects the whole well-being. And as Colchester is a centre where we have got the as everybody says, and we all know about it, is that it's a centre of excellence. And if I have a choice, and I know I'm biased, as most of us would be, Colchester is the best place for it. In South End, people, the patients there, they are very welcome. We will welcome them to come in and use, the facilities, which will be, well equipped. Hopefully, when it becomes a centre, that we have got, the training, and the specialism, and all that to go with it. So I would rather that it be in Colchester for the sake of all the people who comes as the patients to this unit, to receive the best care. And so I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you very much. That concludes the list of speakers. So, Councillor Harris, would you like to sum up, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll be very brief. There's an awful lot of support, obviously, in the room, and thank you for that. A couple of issues there. There is the debate about whether there's 2 or 1, obviously, will be had in another place than here. We are Colchester councillors. We are obviously of one mind on that. So that decision will be taken. My own view is quite simple about that. People who live in Southend have, as Councillor Barton quite rightly said, and I agree with what she said there, is that they have better chances from Southend towards the London direction than we have here in Colchester. So I think that's a very valid point that she made there. So that's for me why Colchester. Councillor Bourne said we're undoubtedly best placed. We are. Councillor Quint said that. We are best placed to achieve the best we can. And it's all about survival rates. It's all about those services and those surgical services that we were talking about there, to make sure they are to remain the best. The investment's got to be there, that we deal with people as quickly as humanly possible to ensure that we continue. Can you imagine 50 years ago, the care that Roger Buston was talking about earlier on, the cancer services at 50, 30 and 20 years ago, very different to today, and survival rates are going up. Long may that continue, because it's a long way to go. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Just except to say one final remark about Councillor Liddy. I thank Councillor Scott for remarks about Councillor Liddy supporting this. Very apt for him, and it's one of the reasons we put this on the table tonight. So thank you very much for your comments, and very positive they were.
Thank you very much. Can I then put the vote to the Chamber that we accept the motion? All those in favour? Unanimous. That's carried. And just a slight reminder to Councillor Harris, I'm not a chair. Right, we'll invite the Councillors Young back in again. Right, so we invite the Councillors Young back in, and Councillor Quince leaves. Musical chairs. Right, we have the Councillors Young back in, so can I invite Councillor Scott, please, to move motion E?
I move that the motion on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the details of which are at pages 2 to 3 of the supplementary information, be approved and adopted.
You may speak on the motion.
The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, is between the EU and the United States regarding a quarter of the world's trade, and it secures a partnership between the EU and the US as a central axis of the global economy. And negotiations by the European Commission are taking place behind closed doors. No scrutiny by local government, nor in fact even by MPs, is taking place. The major issues I'd like us to draw attention to and take steps to put right are the lack of transparency, the implications which could be anti-democracy and anti-local democracy, the effects which it may have on communities, and a disregard for the implication of this agreement on local government by neglecting to take into account local government opinion. Now, the benefits of partnership are present in this agreement, and as you know, partnership working is the lifeblood of our Coalition Council. The benefits could be lower European tariffs, cheaper goods, reduced rate tariffs making customs easier and opening up markets to small businesses, and it was conceived to encourage companies to invest in countries where they might not get a fair hearing in court. All positives. However, there are risks and unsolved issues. First of all, corporations can sue governments, taking legal action against countries perceived to be damaging profits. This is called market access, and it's said to ban monopolies. However, this includes state monopolies, such as our National Health Service. What are the implications of this for local authorities, for our local authority? This may well affect legislation and policies such as minimum wage, policies to benefit the environment, and policies preferring the use of local providers. Big companies can take legal action against countries, counties and boroughs in secret. This is called the investor-state dispute settlement. And fortunately, it's actually being changed by negotiation. But it has resulted in the German government, for example, paying out €3 billion because they shut down nuclear plants following the Fukushima tragedy. And the third thing is the weakening of the laws governing food safety and environmental protection. I'm sure you're aware that those laws are much weaker in the United States than they are in Europe. For example, on GM crops, chemicals in cosmetics, and the use of growth hormones in meat rearing. However, it's not too late to modify this partnership agreement. Negotiations to modify it are ongoing, and there's a considerable interest and lobbying by governments, groups and individuals across Europe, and I believe it should include us. As of July the 10th, the investor-state dispute settlement has been replaced by a new justice system, which will be subject to democratic principles and scrutiny, and in principle establishes that private interests cannot undermine public interests. So good news indeed. However, corporations can still sue government. So how much more vulnerable are we in local government? It is not too late, but there has been no impact assessment about the potential impact of TTIP on local authorities. There's been no scrutiny of the negotiating texts by local authorities or even MPs. local decision-making could be undermined. Sourcing supplies and employing local people, which builds communities, could be prevented. In this motion, I call for Colchester Borough Council to publicise our concerns, enlist the help of the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government and MEPs and MPs and other local authorities in partnership to ensure that we are not prevented from acting in the best interests of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Willett.
Madam Mayor, it sounds as though Councillor Scott has joined the legal profession in the number of words she's using to convey a very simple issue, and contrast that with the previous motion where a powerful idea was put in just one line. And it is quite difficult to make sense of such a detailed motion that seems to go on and on. But I do share to a certain extent the concerns which Councillor Scott is raising about faceless bureaucrats negotiating matters which should be the prerogative of the UK Parliament. And certainly as we move towards a commissioning council outsourcing most of our services, we don't want to see the market dominated by large American corporations. Work should be going to local companies in and around Colchester, not to Europe, not to America. These sort of regulations seem to have little part in what we want to see of good local government. In particular, I deplore the introduction of the investor-state dispute settlement process, where from beyond our shores, undemocratically and unaccountable institutions can override and overturn the democratic decisions of national and local government. We believe, and I think it should be a matter shared in this chamber, that we should be deciding in the UK, by our own UK courts and arbitration services, what happens in regard to local government and its suppliers. But I think Councillor Scott probably misses the point completely. The problem lies not in the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, but in the fact that we are moving from a European common market to a common European political framework. We in the anti-European lobby would welcome her to convert to our cause and welcome her with open arms as an anti-European lobbyist, which is what she seems to be suggesting. So if I conclude my remarks by proposing, Madam Mayor, a secondary amendment which I think will clarify the issue. So I would propose, pursuant to Council Rule 14.6, to add the following words at the end as Resolution 6. To inform the people of Colchester that, in regard to the way local government provides its services, this council opposes with all vigour any drift of legislative powers from the UK Parliament and courts to any European or transnational organisation. I so move.
Right, thank you very much. A secondary amendment has been proposed, so the papers will be circulated to all members, so there will be a pause for a couple of minutes.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Can that secondary amendment be given to the monitoring officer and the chief executive to check? Because I believe that might take away and may negate the original motion, which of course it's not allowed to do.
Whilst it's been circulated, the monitoring officer and the chief exec will look at it and will respond to your comments, Councillor Young. Right, councillors, we are going to come to order in a couple of minutes. As it is quite warm, gentlemen may take off their jackets. I know some have already done so, but you do have the right to do so now. Right, Council, back to order. The monitoring officer and the chief exec have looked at the words, and the wording is not okay. It's not acceptable under Rule 14.9. It is adding a new proposal. So, as the Mayor, I'm rejecting that secondary amendment. You can bring it, if necessary, as another motion to another council meeting on another occasion. So I'll now ask people if they'd like to debate the motion as presented to them. And we've got 3 speakers. I've got Councillors Tim Young, Jay Young and P Higgins. Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I only want to speak very briefly on this because I think Councillor Scott has outlined the arguments very well indeed. As you may have realised, this is a motion that is doing the rounds of a number of councils. A number of councils have already agreed it. It was brought to our attention by Don Manhire, who some will know as a previous officer of this council, now involved with Colchester Fair Trade Group, who sent it to the Labour Group and I think to the Liberal Democrat Group as well for consideration. We discussed it at our group meeting and decided to bring it forward tonight, supporting it. So I do speak in support of it. Councillor Willits tried to say that it was a simple issue. Well, I think it's anything but a simple issue. It's very complex, TTIP, and does need this amount of explanation. It's a motion that's critical of TTIP, but as Councillor Scott pointed out, it's not anti-TTIP. We don't know enough about it. It raises concerns, and I think the concerns it raises that made me support it was that why all the secrecy? If it is a good deal and needs to be put forward to people across Europe, then why aren't we debating it more openly? Why aren't individual parliaments looking at it? Why aren't local government looking at it? And it was the local government element that really attracted me to it. And I think local government does need to know more about its implications, about how it will affect us, our services, our residents, our suppliers. And that's why I think there's nothing here that will take it off the rails, but it will make it more open and transparent, and I would urge councils to support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jay Young.
Like Councillor T Young, I won't speak for very long on this issue, but I think it's important actually to raise awareness, and I think that's the the point of the motion, actually, to try and raise awareness with the public. It's one of those issues that's there's a bit of publicity around it, and then it goes very quiet, and then it kind of comes up again, and then it goes quiet. And, you know, I didn't know a huge amount about this, but I have done some reading around that. But I think just to add to what Councillor Rosalind Scott has said, some of it is about handing power back to bankers, and we all know where that led to in the past. There's threats to the NHS in terms of further privatisation. The standards on food safety is at risk that I think Rosalind alluded to. And there are some privacy laws as well that will be affected as a result of that. And although there is sort of mixed messages coming out, I think the jury has come down on the side of it's likely to lead to job losses, and that's the last thing we want in this country. So I think for those reasons, and for the fact that I think we should be raising more awareness and people should be talking about it and understanding it better, I think we should support the motion, and I shall be doing so, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor P. Higgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Scott for bringing this to the attention of Council, because it is a very important issue, and probably one which I think all of us don't know that much, partly because it's almost not possible to know that much about it at the moment. However, I regret to say I won't be supporting the motion, and it's partly because I don't know enough about what's going on here, but I do know something. I know that one of the fears that has been raised is that large corporations will be able to sue governments. It's been said this will actually be done in secret courts, so you want to be able to see how the decision has been arrived at, and that we're talking about very large corporations here, and just the threat of being able to sue an authority could be enough to make that authority cave in, because they'll be in no position to be able to defend themselves against the legal might that will be directed towards them, and that is very worrying. At the same time, I read somewhere this week that the European Parliament has at least decided, to the extent that they have the power to, that there should not be secret courts and these decisions should be transparent. I would support the motion almost to the end, but I'm a bit wary about where it says, I think it's in section 4, join with local authorities who are opposed to TTIP. And that comes very close to banging our colours to the mast, more or less saying we really not only don't like the look of this, we are practically opposed to it, and it shouldn't happen. For instance, President Obama, who we all have, to varying degrees, I'm sure, great respect for, is trying to support the success of TIP. It's not altogether a bad thing. Some of the arguments put against it I don't find particularly convincing. The idea that a company shouldn't be able to sue a government is not anathema to me. I mean, we hear on many occasions where firms try to enter some countries, not European necessarily, like Japan, where they're told they have open access, but in practice, the criteria join up in such a way that they cannot possibly build the airport or succeed in the contract. And there is no redress at all. And this is trying to, the idea of TIP is to try to get around that and give companies a fair shot, a level playing field to some extent. The example of the nuclear power in Germany, I mean, I don't know much about it, but I hear it often quoted. And it's not clear-cut, that one. What happened is the German government supported nuclear power. That was their position. They have to take the responsibility for that decision. There was the catastrophe in Japan, which made them all think that we've made the wrong decision, no more nuclear power, that's fair enough. But a company that's invested in good faith can then come back and say, OK, you've changed your mind, you've got your reasons, but we have invested, and you encouraged us to do that. We should have redress, we should have our money back. There is that side to it. Also, that all happened without the TIP. So, I mean, this can happen already. So it really isn't a clear-cut thing. It could be that a good agreement along these lines would really benefit the whole of Europe and the United States, and I'm sure that's what President Obama hopes for. And so that's why I'm not keen on an amendment which practically says we are opposed to it. Although at the same time, I think it's a very good idea that it's been brought up, because there are really things to worry about potentially in this agreement, very much along the lines which previous speakers have outlined. So although I do have a lot of sympathy, and I can see where they're coming from, if I can use that phrase, I'll probably end up abstaining to this motion, which is a strange, so a rather long speech for an abstention, so I think I'll sit down now. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Giles next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's rather a shame that Councillor Willett's motion was seen as a wrecking motion, because, of course, we already are under OJEC and OEU OG rules. So, you know, we actually have to go out to internal competition. Effectively, what TTIP is, if you read the Financial Times, any of the business papers, you will see that it's harmonisation of tariffs. At the moment, the European tariff structure means every single person in this country pays £450 a year more than if we had liberalisation of tariffs. GATT actually is what it's about. And it's not necessarily just about America. It's more about BRIC companies, which is Brazil, Russia, India and China. Now, I can understand it's an interesting debate, but this is a parliamentary debate. You know, we've had these in the past, is that they're put out throughout the country, useful for us, but in fact I think that as a council we need far more information on the pros and cons. Cons, of course, there would be Labour legislation liberalisation, potentially. Though it would have big impacts. I'm not sure quite how it would have impacts on us locally, because it would be a national parliamentary decision. And that, of course, takes it absolutely to the core of our role in the European Union. I'm not sure it's the right motion to bring to this council. I'd much rather that we actually had a non-voting debate to tell us exactly what the impacts pro and con might be. You've been very fair, Councillor Scott, actually. I think, you know, you have indicated that actually it would go to the Supreme Court. And you've also indicated, you know, that there are issues, GM food legislation and import of foodstuffs would be opened. These are national and supranational issues. I'm not sure how it necessarily is a debate for us. So I'm always wary of motions that are brought in from elsewhere. Madam Mayor, I know I had a real go at you once about bringing a motion in from elsewhere and repeating it. I think that, you know, I think I'll vote against this, because I think that we could do this ad infinitum. We could bring national issues in here and vote on them without having the capacity to have any impact. I would agree that the Local Government Association, although I can't place a huge amount of faith in the LGA to pick up something quite as complex as this, but oddly enough, I do trust our government of whatever flavour. I think that our civil servants will be well aware, and if you do read the press, you will see, in fact, that they can see that the United Kingdom's international trade is much more than the rest of Europe, Western, and Commonwealth, and actually would relieve tariff barriers. Classic one would be New Zealand on their produce, and equally Australia. And interesting that Councillor Higgins brought up this issue, is that we had to make a choice as to whether allocate tariff barriers against our Commonwealth in support of the European Union. And that was a choice we made, and it's a penalty we took. If TTIP is going to liberalise trade throughout the world to the benefit of some very struggling nations, I'm not sure that we should be making a decision here tonight purely on a local basis. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 speakers still to go. I've got Councillor Buston, Councillor Harris and Councillor Hayes. Councillor Buston.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I do not at all question the bona fides of Councillor Scott in bringing this motion, or indeed the importance of it. My difficulty is, if I'm quite honest, rather as was expounded by Councillor Peter Higgins and Councillor John Giles, I don't know enough about it. And I ask everybody, quite honestly, to look into their own minds in here and say, do you really know enough about this subject? in order for us to be able to pass a motion on it, however well-founded and however well put together. Frankly, I don't know enough about it. It's a little bit like me going in for my final examinations, having read up on what I think I need to answer the question on, and the question is, write down all you know about the law. How long have you got? This subject is so vast, it's so immense in its import and undertaking that I don't know enough about it to be able to put my hand up and say, yes, I support the motion, or, frankly, no, I don't support the motion. I'd be flying blind. And I don't really think or suggest, members, that that is an appropriate thing for us to do. That is why I prefaced my remarks by saying I do not question the bona fides of Councillor Scott in bringing the point that she did. I just don't think we know enough about it in order to be able to form an opinion when particularly it's being debated elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I wasn't going to speak, but I'm prompted to by other speakers, really. I just feel that I'm going to support this totally because the bit that I do know, I'm a simple soul. Councillor Buston says I don't know about it. I'm no expert in it, and why would I be? I'm a simple soul, an ordinary folk. But what I do know is that there is a lot of experience in this room, councillors that have been on this authority for a long time, who believe and practice the role of scrutiny. All of the councillors in here have sometime or other have seen in their time of office, and I've only been on 11 years, there's people in this room triple that, quadruple that, but that's great. But what I'm concerned about is that if scrutiny isn't there for the negotiating test, if scrutiny isn't there for at this level, or regional level, or parliamentary level, then something's amiss. Something is wrong. Without scrutiny, anything can happen. So that's the bit that I'm going to hang my hat on, which is why I'm supporting it here. I believe in scrutiny. Madam Mayor, I shall be supporting it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayes.
Well, I am grateful to Councillor P. Higgins for emphasising the phrase in the last sentence, paragraph 4, where it says that the Council resolves to join with other local authorities which are opposed to TTIP across Europe. Well, I'm not opposed to TTIP across Europe. I'm not opposed to TTIP in Colchester because TTIP doesn't exist yet. TTIP is negotiations, and all of this is premature. And the reason why we can't really have a sensible debate about it is that as yet they're still negotiating. I think another round has recently started. And it is possible for TTIP to be enormously beneficial. I would take issue with Councillor Jowers about it being just about harmonising tariffs. It's about removing non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers, such as having two sets of standards for, I don't know, if you make plastic yoghurt pots or something, and you have to comply with European rules, and then you want to export them to Florida, and you find you also have to comply with Florida rules, so you have a double whammy of expensive things to comply with, which is very bad for small and medium-sized companies. It's all right for big companies because they've got enormous resources. And therefore TTIP is potentially beneficial. But it's only potentially beneficial and it's only potentially harmful. And until we actually know what the details are, we can't really sensibly say we're against. So I can't support this motion. And what I would suggest is that in future we don't just find ourselves debating resolutions that have been kind of brought in from another, from an interest group. Because that was slipped in right at the end, and it would have committed us to opposing something we basically don't know about because we can't know about it. So I think I probably will end up opposing this.
Well, thank you very much. I've got no more speakers, so I'm going to invite Councillor Scott to sum up, please.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to answer several of those things. I think the most important thing is that it is precisely the problem that we don't know enough about this. I have tried to give a balanced view of TTIP, and actually listening to you, I'm happy to withdraw item 4 because it does imply a rejection of TTIP and the partnership, whereas actually I am voicing a concern, and my concern is that we have not had the chance to look at the negotiation. We have not had the chance to actually consider how this affects us as a local authority and as local authorities. You know, I understand your concerns about that and the implication, and I'm happy to withdraw that part of it. But I stand by the other parts, and had I heard your argument, I might have rephrased that 4, but I'm happy to withdraw it. With regards to the complexity of the motion, I have tried to simplify it for you, Councillor Willits, and I have said actually that it calls for us to publicise our concerns, enlist help, and ensure that we're not prevented from acting in the best interests of our communities. I'm not anti-European Union, as you probably know. I am actually anti-handing excessive powers to global corporations, and so on that regard, I am not for turning.
Well, thank you very much. We now have a motion of which the resolutions on, with number 4 being withdrawn, is now being put to you. So, are you happy to accept the motion as amended by the proposer? All those in favour? You're voting on the motion with item 4 removed. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Right, the motion is lost. There's 16 for, 18 against, and 7 abstentions. 8 abstentions. Thank you very much. We'll now take a 10-minute break as we've now been going for an hour and a half. Thank you, members.